Okay, so we talk about the history of Jewish law. We got to the Talmud. This is our session number 8 on the topic. And to recap, so every time we know sort of like the historical context, we start our legal history starts with the Torah, which is the written law, and according to tradition, alongside it, the oral law. For hundreds of years or 1,000 years or more, people studied it as was, the written. They memorized, but they also had the oral law that they kept in mind. In about 200 years before the Common Era, Midrash Halacha starts evolving, or maybe 300 years before the Common Era. Midrash Halacha is developed into a system where you say the text from the Torah and the commentary. For 300-400 years, this also material is being collected and piled up to the extent where people cannot handle all the material. And if you want to retrieve halachot and laws, it's difficult because they're organized by the order of the verses of the Torah, and one theme could be scattered over many humashim and many books. So Rabbi Ovadia takes upon himself to organize all this material in format of orders, tractates, chapters, and units called Mishnayot, where he put all the material together. But he didn't do a final editing, meaning he didn't change the original text. He touched it very little because it was already studied in an oral form for hundreds of years, and he knew that if he changes something, it's going to disrupt the sequence, and it will be difficult for them to memorize it. And that was the one thing. The other thing that's important to know is that he was concerned that once he writes it down, halakha becomes rigid and there is no room for changes and for flexibility, but he decided to do it anyway because he felt that the people cannot command all this knowledge, and that because of the political situation, persecutions before him, now that they had relative peace and tranquility, they could do that. Now, what he did with the final product is not clear. There's a debate between two versions of history that we have that came from a later period, the time of Rav Shirira Gaon, about 800 years later. We found we have the letter that Rav Shirira Gaon wrote to the people of Spain. They asked him about the formation of the Mishnah. And he says, this is what Rabbi Ovadia did. He uses a word, which is the Arabic word for book, mushaf in singular, or masahif in plural, but it's not clear from that usage of the word whether what Rabbi Ovadia did was write books. That's one opinion. That when he did the Mishnah, he basically had his scribes write many copies of the Mishnah, and distribute them to people, to the scholars. Or, which is the more probable possibility, he just had one official copy that was kept in his academy in Yavne, or in the Galilee, and people had to come over there, memorize it, and then go back to their academies. So they still depended on the oral tradition, and sometimes there would be discrepancies because of how people memorized it. So these are the two options. Now, parallel to Rabbi Ovadia, there are sources that we don't, in our regular classes, we don't cite too much, but people who study Talmud or in the yeshivot on a regular basis do use them. There's another body of knowledge before we get to the Talmud called Tosefta. Tosefta comes from the word Tosefet, which is an addition or an addendum to the Mishnah, and that was basically, there are different opinions on that also. Some say it was just all the Mishnayot that Rabbi Ovadia reviewed and said, oh, this is too long, or this is not the right version, and he put them outside. So people also call them baraita, from the word external. Bara in Arabic, bar in Aramaic, means out. So baraita are the ones who were pushed out. That's one version of how they were created.
Where did they win?
Oh, so they were just, according to this tradition, they were the same scribes of Rabbi Ovadia who put together the Tosefta. But more probable, and that's what happened, that parallel to Rabbi Ovadia, there were other rabbis who said, oh, we have our version of the text. We are going to do it differently. Most famously, Rabbi Haim and Rabbi Oshaya, and they wrote their own files called Tosefta. and each one of them had his own version. But later on,
which version did Ravina and Ravashi use to compile?
Good. So when Ravina and Ravashi, that Madis mentions, we'll see, are considered to be the editors of the Talmud. When they looked at the Mishnayot and sometimes the external Mishnayot, the answer is that we don't know which file they used, and most probably we can. Now the comparison has been done. What we can tell for sure is that the official version of the Tosefta that's printed at the end of the Talmud is not what they had, and because in many cases they raise a question and the answer is right there in the other file and they don't use it, or other examples. Anyway, those unofficial versions, which let's call the Tosefta is an unofficial version of the Mishnah, was pushed aside because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had the prestige and the position to be able to promulgate and market his version, and everybody went by it, and this became the official version, the Mishnah. And immediately, that, unlike the more of twilight zone or the flexible period between Midrash Halacha and Mishnah, with the Gemara, because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi made an official version, the moment it was sealed and codified and given to people either physically or orally, the work of commentary started. You get a text, you open it, say, what does it mean here? What does this mean? What does this mean? Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi recorded, for example, a mahloket. One person says A, the other person says B, right? We say it every Friday night when we read the Madlikin. En Madlikin, ela b'shem zayit bilvad. Right? Madlikin u'vamen Madlikin. En Madlikin, b'shem shumshamim, b'shem whatever. They mention, right. So they mention a list of oils that you can light with. Hachamim, the rabbis say you could light with all oils, no exceptions. And one says, no, you can't use oils that cause bad smell or that splatter because you are going to put out the candle on Shabbat. And finally, Rabbi Tarfon, which by the way is a Greek name. It's from remember the Trifonas? Mm-hmm. Trifon is the same, Rabbi Tarfon is from the same root.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So Rabbi Tarfon says, En madlikin ela b'shem zayit bilvad. Only olive oil. So I have three opinions. Now what do you do? What do you follow? One says you could use all oils. One says any oils except for those which have bad smell, and one says only olive oil. And the Talmud in the commentary brings a dialogue and exchange with Rabbi Tarfon. The people told him, it's easy for you to say to only light with olive oil because you're rich. Rabbi Tarfon had the orchards of olives, and he says you can afford it. Now we cannot afford it. So now you look at the halacha. What do? Do you use? And this is a simple thing, because you could say any candle you lit, it's still good. Then you have discussions. How many candles do you light on Hanukkah? Do you start with 1 going to 8? Do you start with 8 going to 1? Still okay. If you did this, you did that, you could say it's okay. You still fulfill the mitzvah. Then you have disputes about how much money do you have to give in a kiddushim, in a marriage, for them to be valid. One rabbi says pruta or shve pruta. It's turned like it's 1/8 of an ounce of silver, something like that. And the other one says it has to be dinar or shve dinar. It's a hefty coin of the time. So according to one opinion, if you gave less than the larger amount, the marriage is not valid. So all these things had to be clarified. You had contradictions, you had disputes. So the commentary started right away, and this commentary on the Mishnah is what today is known as Talmud or Gemara. They're actually interchangeable. Originally they were interchangeable, but now people use them differently. So the term Talmud comes from the Hebrew word lamad. So it basically means to learn. Mishnah comes from the word shana, which is to memorize by heart. So when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote the Mishnah, he says basically, you have nothing to learn here, additional and to what is written. You just remember that. That's it. But the rabbis who came after him says, no, we do have to comment on that and study it. So they call it Talmud from the word lamad. Gamar, is the Aramaic for to learn. But usually Gamir in Aramaic means to learn from a rabbi, like by tradition. So originally it was interchangeable, either you had Gemara or Talmud. Today most people think of it that way. Talmud is the totality of the book, and it's broken into the Mishnah, which was edited by Rabbi-ovadia Nasi, and the Gemara, which is commentary. Now, we could talk about the Talmud for years, not finish just as introduction. But Talmud has become the most important book that is studied in the yeshivot. But I could tell you from now that there was a certain point, and it was in the history of the Sephardic yeshivot, that the Talmud was pushed aside. Just as with each generation, people said, okay, we cannot study the material as it was taught until now, we have to move to a new system. So also with the Talmud, what happened with the Talmud was that it kept branching out. You open the Mishnah, like the chapter I mentioned yesterday, when they worked on association, and they put 10 laws that are not related to each other. Then you open the Talmud, the right commentary on that, so the discussion now opens to 100 different directions. And not only that, sometimes there would be a rabbi who would only, in all his life, he made 3 or 4 valuable statements. So now, whenever they quote him, they bring all the other statements, so they will stay in one place. They are not related to the text. That's so, and I know that as a fact, but teaching Gemara for many years in high school and when studying in yeshiva in different settings, people are sometimes lost in the discussion, because you start. I used to do it with a flow chart to keep the main body of the discussion, and then you see all arrows moving to the right and to the left, going into this discussion, to that discussion. Another problem of the Talmud, that when you study it, like Daf Yomi, is that even after they arrived at the decision and they know what the result is, they will keep bringing arguments against it. Why? To save time for future generations. Because you're going to, let's say, I got some famous example is in Elu Metziot, Ye'ush Shalom Mida'at. The discussion there is, what happened if I found a lost object within, and I know for sure that the owner gave up hope of ever recovering it. So, for example, if you find something in an airport, right, or in Penn Station in New York, right, something without clear identification marks. Now, if I found, for example, let's say even a book. No, there's no name, nothing. I found a book here in the synagogue, but I know the name of the book. I will put an ad that says whoever lost this book, can find it. I find the same book in Penn Station. You say, you don't know. The person who passed here for 1 minute, he could be right now in Seattle, or maybe is just downtown Manhattan. You don't know. Millions of people pass there. So you could argue that, just one example, that you could keep that. Now what if Yehush Shalom Midat? You don't know whether enough time passed for that person to realize that he lost his object. Can you still use it or not? Do you have to... a whole discussion there. So if those of you who studied this sugya, you studied that, right? That the Talmud says, okay, I'll prove you wrong. I'll prove you that it is, let's say that the object is yours, right? Unlike what you say that you can't rely on it. And they bring like 12 different cases that could prove the other point. And in each case, the argument is the same argument. No, that doesn't apply here because of this and that. So, okay, I got it. After 2 or 3 examples, I'm going to bring the 4th example. You're going to make the same argument. So what's the point in continuing?
The point is that it teaches you how to think because there will be other situations. So the whole point of the Gemara is not to actually come up with a bottom line, but it's to come up with a way to.
Okay, I hear people say
understand the set of.
I hear. There's no question.
Used.
Yeah, I hear your argument, and a lot of people say that, and there's no question that learning Gemara sort of sharpens your mind. The problem is that you could only stretch this kind of exercise to a certain point. If you look today, if you go today into a study hall where people study Gemara, in what today is called the Lithuanian method, the brisk method, you will see really hundreds and thousands of people engage in just mental exercises, which is beautiful, but has no practical application.
It does have a practical.
It does not.
The practical application is that those same people will be faced with making decisions on halacha,
beautiful.
On other matters, and they'll know what the principles to apply are in order to come up with an answer.
Right. So I know we're touching a sensitive issue, but I can tell you from my own interaction and exchanges with many, including in my family, including my students, and people ask me questions, including rabbis who are trained in yeshivot. When they come to a practical decision, they are lost. They don't know what to do. Because they were trained to have this mental exercises and so many possibilities. So we had cases where, I don't know, we're in a bedin, and we have people there, and they need an answer right away. And we have a certain kind of emergency. What are we going to do? I say, we could rely on this and that. My money to say that could serve it. No, we don't know, because on the other hand, this is a possibility, and Rabbi this, let's call Rabbi that, and they call it, the Rabbi, we don't know. Okay, so now the whole process is delayed, people suffer. This is not, or I had a discussion with a man who studied in yeshiva many years. I said, he was staying in my house. I said, can I make you a cup of tea? No, I don't drink tea on Shabbat. Why? Why don't you drink tea on Shabbat? Why? I don't know.
Okay, right.
I don't know how to make tea on Shabbat. So no, to me, this is preposterous. If your only result of, but I don't want to get carried away with that. 1 second. What I'm saying is this. That's the problem. That what you're describing today is the theory that has been taught for many years. Let me continue that. For many years by the Lithuanian yeshiva world. The Sephardic world was psak oriented. You study, you need to know what to do lahalakha.
But that's one extreme versus another. I totally agree with you. The problem is not in one extreme or the other. The question is, neither is taught the balance between the two.
There is a balance, and I'll tell you in a second. I'm going to a certain point. The Talmud started, like I said, the discussion started at the year 200, right, 225. They went on until the time of a Gaoni for about 500 years. Deliberations and written text and editing and adding and copying, etc. Okay, they went on for 500 years. At the time of the Gaonim, which we'll get to soon, at the time of the Gaonim, they reorganized the material. And after the Gaonim, towards the end of the time of Gaonim, one of the greatest sages in Jewish history, which we could say was the first legal codifier, or the Pusek Halacha, Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi, right? Fez. But it was in Fez only for a short time. But it was from North Africa. It had North African roots. He spent time in Spain and North Africa, mainly in a city called Qalat Hamad, and not in Fez, but that it was called Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fasi from Fez. And what he did, he cleaned the Talmud from any discussion that has no applicable, practical application. He took out all the stories, number one. He also took out all the laws that are not relevant for today: sacrifices, nazir, deviate woman, leprosy, purity, etc. And on top of that, from the discussion that are relevant, he removed all the unnecessary parts of the discussion. And still it was something that if you studied it, you had to really work hard, use analytic tools and all that. For hundreds of years, from about 1000 to the 1400s, this was the main course in the Sephardic yeshivot. But then the Ashkenazi yeshivot brought back the Talmud and back into a lot of discussion that's out of the practical relevant world. But we'll stop here, continue more with examples of a discussion of the Gemara, and I'll go in depth with you also.